In fighting games, the better players should come out on top. And this goes for a lot of competitions. The stronger person should lift a heavier weight, the smarter person should win at chess, so the better player should win in a fighting game match. But in fighting games, what makes a player better than another? Does a better player have better execution to do their really difficult combos? Or do they know the most about the game, right down to each individual character? Maybe instead of looking at these two things, we can look at a results-based standpoint and say the player who does better in bracket is the better player. But even when you know more about the game than your opponent, can do really good combos and do decently in your locals, you still lose to this guy. This doesn't really make any sense. Since all they're doing is pushing the B button, they probably don't even know anything about your character, and you keep seeing this guy go 0-2 at events. But you still lost. So we really need to take a look at the most important thing in fighting games, decision making. Imagine a game of rock, paper, scissors, but I can only play rock while my opponent only knows how to play paper. No matter how hard I try, I'll always lose. And I'll also get pretty mad since, quote unquote, doing the same thing over and over again doesn't make a player good. But all I really need to do to beat this guy is use scissors. So why don't I just use scissors? Maybe I didn't know that scissors existed in the first place. Maybe I don't like to play scissors because I'm more of a rock guy, or maybe I just think that playing scissors is a cheap strategy. This happens all the time in fighting games. Maybe you're not looking at a particular strength that your character has, or maybe you're just overlooking a weakness that your opponent's character has. Maybe you really only like to play rushdown and don't really like to play patiently, or maybe you just think that playing in this way is really cheap, unfair, and stupid. But let's say you do know some solutions now. Maybe you can jump over Samus's charge shot to punish her. Or maybe you can run up to her, shield, wait for her to shoot her charge shot, and then get an easy punish. But then when you developed all of these counters, your opponent does this. Now this doesn't make any sense either. You develop counterplay and somehow that counterplay is getting counterplayed. Maybe your character is just so bad that they can't fight Samus, or maybe your opponent just is reading every single thing you do. What your opponent has done is create something called a flowchart. Maybe they know a good answer to their charge shot is jumping over it, so they use a preemptive aerial to stuff you. Maybe they know that you want to shield a lot, and so they use a grab to catch you off guard. Sometimes it's easier to have a flowchart strategy. After all, why change what your opponent cannot beat? Most of the time, players aren't really playing against other players, but rather they're using their flowcharts to beat their opponent's flowcharts. Imagine a Pokemon battle. Fire types will always beat grass types, but will lose to water types. If you only use fire types in your tournament, you're essentially gambling your win away, because you're relying and praying that you won't run into any water types on your way to grand finals. But what if you could change your typing mid-match? If you have good observation, have a good mastery over your options, and understand your opponent's options, you'll eventually gain the ability to change the way you play during a match, which can beat anyone who sticks to an inflexible flowcharty playstyle. And even better, once you start beating these inflexible flowchart players, you'll start running into more flexible, more player-based players. And now the game becomes player versus player instead of flowchart versus flowchart, i.e., you're actually playing the game. I'll start talking about adaptation in a future video though, since after all, that's a really big topic to unpack. So when you're playing against the same Samus main who mashes neutral B and down B in the corner, remember that the answer to your problem doesn't lie in only your knowledge, your execution, or your results, but really what it's about is the decisions you make to beat your opponent. However, finding this knowledge or learning these things on your own can be hard, especially with the amount of misinformation out there. So subscribe to this channel for future resources on how to beat these strategies, how to improve as a player, character overviews, and more.